Luke Thomas of Morning Combat here at Xtreme Couture with Xtreme Couture head coach, and I should say MMA super coach, Eric Nicksick. Eric, how are you?
It's great to have you in finally, huh?
Yeah, I'm finally here. You invited us in, so we're here to talk to him about UFC 276, but a few other things along the way. So let's begin. All right, so Big Francis, I know he's done some interviews. He's 3 months into rehab. Have you talked to him? Have you seen him? Give us an update on how things are going with him.
Just saw him last week. It was great to see him. He's big, but not like fat. He just feels like he put on a little bit of that, like
Eating some waffles on
freshman
vacation?
15, one of those things. But I was so happy to see him. He's back in at the PI getting his rehab done, which makes me feel really good because they have such a good staff over there. So, and he's moving around great. So we were actually supposed to hit pads on Saturday, get back in the gym, get some movement stuff going on, but some schedule conflicts came up. But he's ready to go. So we're going to start moving around here soon.
Do you have a preference about when he returns? He was saying maybe December, maybe 2023. I mean, I realize we're not doctors, but from a coaching perspective, what do you think? Because here's the thing. He has lost training time by virtue of the rehab.
I don't really have a preference, and I think that each individual, especially with that type of injury, they have to come back when they know that they feel right. I look at it like this. When we get cleared to come back to full-time training, I would love another 3 months of actually getting back to work and getting into the things that we like to do behind the scenes. And then when you get a camp or when you get an opponent, then everything's going to kind of narrow into your game plan. So you almost want 3 months of easing into a camp and then getting into your specifics as far as the game plan stuff goes. So if I had my choice, I wouldn't mind fighting in 2023, but it's really going to be up to him and how far along this rehab process is. All
right, so UFC 276 on that main card, one of the bigger fights. Obviously, it's a huge card, but of course, one of your understudies. He is. Okay, let's talk about that. Sean Strickland is going to take on Alex Pereira. Let's talk about Sean for a second. Before we get to his fighting, I don't know him, you know him, and there's no way to be an MMA coach if you can't deal with, let's say, unusual personalities.
Yes.
He says outrageous things.
Yeah.
What kind of guy is Sean Strickland? Give us from your perspective how you understand him.
He's one of the best teammates you're going to have in the room. He's a guy that he pushes each individual in here. That doesn't matter the weight class. He'll come in for early sparring when the 145ers will come in a little bit earlier to get work. Sean's here early and helping coaching these guys and help corner these guys. He has a delivery to him that maybe fits more of like your and I era of style, right? Where it's like that old school weight training coach that's yelling at you and screaming at you. I like that mentality. A lot of people might push away from that mentality. So I just had a conversation with him recently. He had a good point about one of our fighters, but it was the delivery that he was saying it in. I said, look, man, if you want to coach or help coach people, sometimes it's your approach. So you have to have the right key, the right tool for the job in certain individuals. What you're saying was absolutely 100% correct, but it's the way that you said that. Do you understand that? And he's very receptive to that. He's like, oh, you're right. I should have said it differently. I should have approached it better. So he's not like this wild man with his hair on fire every day when he comes in here. But he does have this edge to him. And I think that edge reminds me of the Xtreme Couture of the past. And maybe that's why I really find him endearing. And I think a lot of the guys that have been here for a long time do as well.
I will say this, and I know you're a coach, and this is a hard question to ask, so I'm going to be as delicate about it as I can. Do you worry about, because he actually put out a video yesterday I saw on social media saying, I have to do this press conference and I'm worried I'm going to trip over myself. There is something to be said for, I don't know, he's a little feral, right? He's a little feral.
Yes.
And that might be good for fighting. I don't know how good that is for product presentation. Have you guys ever had a conversation with, I'm not telling you not to be who you are, but there is something to be said for what the public consumes from you.
I 100% agree, and I do feel that a lot of times I said, remember that we are handcuffed one way or another, right? Like you represent me and this gym, so you have to be very, very careful with what you do say. And none of us, probably 80% of us, don't agree with shit that he says, right? But I do want him to be able to feel like he can be himself, but tread lightly on some of the things that you do say. And some of those things that you do say are great for in the gym. Leave it in here. But when you get out on the mic, you getting out in press conference, you have to kind of put that mask on and understand that not everybody's going to agree with your side or your principles. In here, it's a different story. It's the gym life. We all deal with that. But I don't want to see him say something and just get canceled or something, like, because I really do feel like the guy's a good person. He's a good dude. A lot of times he's very misunderstood.
It's interesting, to the point you make about being a teammate. It was funny. I interviewed Johnny Eblen, and actually when Johnny Eblen won against Gegard Mousasi, one of the guys he shouted out was Sean Strickland.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of that from Sean Strickland, that he just is sort of like a giving guy in the room. But I don't know. There's no way to translate that to the public without one of the other fighters shouting him out, right? Like, that's a hard thing to understand absent being in here.
100%, and it's that fraternity, right? It's almost like the special forces or guys within the room or within those teams that you kind of have to see it to believe it, to understand it. So, interesting backstory. Johnny's manager called me. He was going to have Johnny come out for a week. I was out of town, and I go, you know what? I think you and Strickland would actually work out really well together. I put him on a group chat, and Strickland basically hijacked Eblen for the whole week and a half that he was out here. They just trained, and I think I worked with Johnny once. He worked with the team quite a bit, but really him and Strickland hit it off. And then Johnny left, and they called me and said, hey, is it cool if Sean comes out and trains with us? Absolutely. Have him go out. Give us a break from Sean Strickland for a week, But those two really hit it off, and you can see the camaraderie that they built in a short amount of time and helping really push one another. And I'll tell you this, Luke, there wasn't a happier guy on the planet when Johnny won than Sean Strickland. The guy's calling me, losing his mind, and he's only worked with him a couple times, but you see that sweat equity right away.
All right, Sean is on a hell of a run. I think he hasn't lost in something like 4 years or something crazy. I think 2018 was his last loss, and it's not like he's fighting chumps out there. We'll talk about the Pereira fight in just a second, but is there a broader picture here? Why has he been so successful? What is the key to understanding Sean Strickland's success?
I think he's evolving in his MMA skill set. I think, when he first started it, I remember when he was coming into Xtreme Couture when he was fighting at 170, he was more of a grappling based fighter. And then I think his boxing started to pick up. But remember, like in those days, it was very a la carte. It's like, well, I'm going to box right now, and then I'll just jump in and I'll wrestle, right? There was no blend between the two arts. And I think that he started to understand, like, well, if I start feinting level changes, if I start doing this, it's going to blend the two together very, very well. The other thing that I think is very intriguing about Sean is his style of defense. When I hold pads for Sean, is like you wouldn't coach a guy to block a punch way out here, like this kind of Wing Chun style and everything else, right? But he's efficient and he doesn't get hit. But the way that he counters off of these things, it's very, I think, particular to Sean and his style that he's kind of grown over the years. So I guess to answer your question, I feel like he's kind of matured into his own sort of martial artist as the years gone on through his experience and his training.
In terms of, I always ask this question to fighters who have done really well, like, how did you figure out what your style was? But it doesn't seem so obvious. Sometimes they kind of just luck into it. Sometimes whatever they like just kind of pulls them that way, even if that's not necessarily the best. When you think about, not just for Sean, but like guys developing styles, how hard is it to know what's right for them?
See, here's the thing with Sean that I didn't love in the past about a lot of our guys, but Sean spars maybe 4 times a week, 3-4 times a week. And his mentality is, if I'm sparring, I'm creating, I'm seeing, I'm collecting data, I'm doing all my reads, I'm doing everything. What better way to get better at my craft than actually applying it in the cage and spar? So, we drill a lot, we hit pads a lot, we do other things so you're saving your brain health. Sean is kind of from a different mindset. He's like, hey, if I'm going to be an artist, I want to be on the canvas, I want to paint. Right? Opposed to like, well, I'm going to go do something else and do this and do this and do this. So I think a lot of the things that Sean has been applying is because he's sparring killers day in and day out. Ankalaev, can I get around? Francis, can I get around? Edmund, can I get like he's seeking out the hard work to try to apply what he's learning and putting it into real life scenarios.
Well, I spoke to Max Holloway last night, and again, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all for MMA fighting. I don't think that at all. But he is really a big proponent of not doing a lot of sparring and then leaving it in the cage. But I guess, what is the right answer for sparring? Is it that, okay, for you, maybe more is good, for you, maybe none is good? How do you approach that as a coach?
Well, it's interesting because I bet you Max Holloway has sparred thousands of hours of rounds throughout his life, throughout his career. So I think when you get to a guy like Max where he's at his level, maybe slowing some sparring down is actually really good for him. But then you get guys that hear Max talk about it that are really young or new in the sport, and they're like, well, I'm going to do what Max does. Well, hold on. Max has earned that right to not spar as much as he does. So I think it's a fine line of understanding where they're at, their talent, and knowing they're almost, have they been knocked out a bunch? Have they had, some problems with their chin? Maybe you save it for the fights and save their chin in the room. And then there's guys that like Ray Sefo, spars 2 times a week. He's 50 some odd years old. He's in there every week, getting it in. So I think it just really depends on the fighter.
Those Kiwis are different, though.
Man, he's different. He's different.
They're a different breed. Yep. Okay, but let's talk about the fight itself. Sean Strickland taking on Alex Pereira. Now, Pereira, I'm sure you guys have – well, actually, I should ask you, to what extent is Pereira's kickboxing footage relevant to you?
I think – so technical things you're going to pick up, but I look for more mannerisms or keys or details in the data if I can pick something up. And then if there's anything like applied pressure to him, how does he react to it? What does he counter with? Is there any tendencies that you might be able to take from old sparring footage, old kickboxing, and then go and apply it to the Bruno Silva fight and the other matchups that you've seen him in with the UFC? Does the data ring true from the old kickboxing into now what he's doing with MMA? Does he counter to the inside? Does he slip here? Does he do this? So being able to collect that data and then go and apply it. So now once you go and apply it, and then in the first round you get your reads, you kind of feel it out. Okay, what we're seeing is now transparent here in this fight. Come Saturday, then we'll know we're on to something.
Is Sean aware of what? I mean, even Dana White didn't really hide from it. They were. I think it was Jim Rome or somebody else was asking him if Pereira wins, he should fight Izzy. It's like, well, hold on, he's got to fight Sean Strickland. Is Sean aware of kind of the narrative about this fight a little?
He's very aware of it, but I'm not bringing it up too much. I think he understands. We all understand the gravity of this fight for him. But I think ignorance is bliss sometimes for Sean. I think he just likes to go out and get into a fist fight, and I don't want to put any more added pressure to the situation already. So we do have a tall task in front of us, and we understand that. We've been told that the winner out of this fight will get the next title fight. I believe
either way.
Either way.
Wow, okay.
Is what we've been told.
Right.
So, we understand that. And for me, I hate to say this, I don't care how he wins. Let's just go get a W, and let's make it the right way.
Okay. What makes Alex Pereira good?
Man, I think, his feint game is something else too. Like just the way he draws things out, the way I think he's kind of a very daunting figure at the 185-pound division, and his pedigree and his history alone when he steps in the cage. I think a lot of times people are fighting the name rather than the person in front of them. So I think it's important to kind of get that out of your head that this is another human being we have to go in and scrap. But, I think for the MMA's sake of things, I think having Glover Teixeira involved and working on some of his ground game, and he had a lot of really good sound get-ups against Bruno Silva. So he's evolving, I think, in the right way. But has he done enough to get to where that title fighting a guy like Sean Strickland this close? I don't know. But for me, I think just his reputation alone, I think, has helped carry him into some of these positions.
Interesting. Okay, so one thing that's I don't know how aware you are of what MMA Twitter says about Sean, but in terms of the fighting, again, the success is remarkable the last 4 years, but they always note, there's a gap between how he talks, which is a little bit crazy, and then how he fights, which is very thoughtful. What do you make of what is that? Why is there this apparent dichotomy, whereas you see some guys get, like Hamzat talks a big game and then gets shot out of a cannon?
Right.
Sean's quite the opposite, right?
Right. Yeah, I think he is actually very smart. I think he is very, very calculated. And for Sean, I always say this to him, the term is calculated chaos, right? For what we see, it's almost like when you watch Justin Gaethje, it looks like it's very chaotic at times, but it's very calculated as well for him. And I feel like Sean's a lot of the same similar type of style. And then when Sean applies his pressure, I see it day in and day out. When he's a pressure fighter, he's in your face, and he has a lot of volume. He might not be the hardest puncher in the division, but it's that punches and bunches and that volume, and it starts to set up his power. So he's almost like that base hit guy, and then all of a sudden the home run kind of sets himself up.
Right. A good slugging percentage.
Yes,
so
exactly.
All right, so you're also on the corner of another fighter on the card, Brad Tavares taking on Dricus du Plessis. Brad has had an interesting run, so 2-fight win streak, but he has not been very active. In fact, I think in the last 4 years he's only had 4 fights. 2 of them, one the losses to Adesanya and then Edmund Shabazian, but he's had the 2 good rebounds against Akhmedov and, forgive me for that. Shoeface, yes. Send them both to the PFL, I suppose. How is Brad's health? He's 34. That's not old, but that's not exactly young either.
He's actually doing really well. We had a couple of injuries in the past that had set him out, and then he's fully recovered from those injuries. We had a fight against Brendan Allen. And, there was this one of his, we're working a couple techniques, and it wasn't what I'm used to seeing out of Brad. And so myself and Ray decided, hey, we're going to go back and see if what the doctor says, and they decided to pull him out. And he had a small little surgery done, and he took that time, and he had another baby in the meantime. So Brad's another one of those guys who's been here forever. The wars he's had in this gym, the sparring and everything else. I don't think that you want to hang on that stuff a lot, but I'm just glad to know that he's been in the gym and working and been active, although he hasn't been fighting in the cage. Still,
how do you view ring rust? Like, how real is ring rust to you?
I think it's big if you're not understanding some of the evolution of what's going on in MMA. You and I both see it all the time. The game changes quickly. And if you're not applying some of those changes or seeing some of those changes in the room, then I think it's a big deal. But if you're sitting on the couch, if you're injured and you're not doing anything and you're just hanging at home, I think it has a big effect on people. So I tell guys, if there's an injury or you're unable to train or you're traveling, whatever it may be, don't forget about getting your mental reps in. Jump on YouTube. Go buy a DVD series. See if there's ways that you could apply new things. Go back and watch your old fights and see if there's things that you could pick up on yourself that we can better and improve. So I really think it's depending on the fighter and what they're doing in that time, right? Like I feel like Henry Cejudo is like still very involved. He's still coaching. Right. He's still doing all those things. So I would guess when Henry came back, he wouldn't really miss that big of a beat.
All right, so same question I asked you about Pereira. I'll ask you about du Plessis. What makes him good?
He's erratic. And I say that in a good way. Like he's throwing things from angles that you're not really expecting. God, like I hate to use this word, but it's one of my favorites. Jay Heron always called those guys boogers. He's a booger. That guy's a booger. And we say that with all due respect. Yeah. It's like, it's a cut kick. It's this. And then it's a spin. And then it's a straight cross down the middle. So he's very erratic with his motions, and it's very hard to collect data off of him because you don't really know what you're going to get next. Okay, I'm going to parry this jab, and then maybe he's going to do something different the next time out. So I think he's super talented. I think he's very athletic, and I think the athleticisms kind of match up between him and Brad.
Fair enough, but you are a guy who believes, obviously, in Brad's upside. I'll ask actually a similar question. What makes Brad good from your standpoint?
His eyesight. His veteran, I think his cage presence and his fight IQ, but his eyesight is something else. When you see him firing on all cylinders, especially going against like Sean or Chris Curtis and Puna, the 85ers in the room, Brad is probably the hardest guy in the room to touch. And then when his counters are within motion of his slips and his eyesight. So if he's slipping something, there's a counter coming at the same time. It's not like slip, counter. It's counter, so I think his vision is probably one of the best in the gym by far.
One question about your responsibility, again, I'm assuming your guys are planning for nothing but victory, but let's say in previous cases where you have to corner someone multiple times or corner different fighters multiple times in a single event, how much does the success of the first one affect? And I know you have a job to do and be a professional, but you're a human being as well.
True.
And sometimes losses can be devastating.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not in any way predicting a Tavares loss, just to be very clear, but I am saying, to what extent does what happens in the first fight affect your focus in the second?
That's a great question, Luke. And a lot of times that we've gotten that win, and you can come rolling in too high, too hot, and too heavy and roll it over to the next guy. And then for me, if it's a loss, take a moment, clear your head, and then bring that energy right back that you needed to have for the next person, because they know what happened. They know what's going on, but they're going to feed off of your energy just like anything else. So coming in with a clear conscience and being ready to go. That happened when Joe Benavidez fought Askar, and Joe's a very, very close friend of mine. It wasn't the way we wanted to go. I knew that there was a good chance Joe was probably going to retire. But in the meantime, I had Aljamain Sterling over here getting ready to fight for his first title fight. Right. So you have to just kind of have a short memory, never too high, never too low. Clear your mind, get ready to go for the next guy up.
Tough assignment. Okay, so let's talk now about fights you're not involved in. How about that co-main event? Again, I sat down with Max yesterday. I got to tell you, this fight is so special.
Man.
You don't see trilogies like this very often. You don't see fighters like this very often matched up. You've seen the first fight. You've seen the second fight. The second fight, to me, seems more informative than the first one. What are you expecting between these two? Like, what kind of fight is it going to look like? Max thinks it's not going to go beyond 3. That could be just, rhetoric. I don't know. But what's it going to look like?
I love everything about this fight. And what makes it more intriguing for me now is Volkanovski's last fight against Korean Zombie.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm watching this guy. I'm like, I feel like Volkanovski just evolves every time out, and he's better and adds new things. And for me, having a champion in my stable, it makes me inspired to know, like, okay, we have to add new wrinkles every time out, and he's just not the same fighter again, right? So had I not seen the KZ or the Korean Zombie fight, and it would have just been the Max fight right away, I would have felt like it was a little bit closer than on paper. But I think a lot of even the odds makers, they're still kind of in what they saw with the Korean Zombie fight, and I was very impressed as well. And then when you go back and watch the second fight with Max, I had it 1, 2, and 3 for Max the first 3 rounds.
Right.
But again, we're not judges, and these guys get paid to do their job. So you can make that argument as well. So where did Max feel like he messed up in that last fight? Did he let the gas off in 4 and 5? Should he have put an exclamation point on that? So he had time to go back and kind of figure out where he could improve on and maybe seal those rounds a little bit better, solidify those rounds. So there is no question when you get into the decision. I sealed 1, 2, and 3, right? You can coast 4 and 5, but that's not the way I would coach it. I'm trying to win all 5 of those rounds and make it a decisive decision. So either way, man, I think it could be a coin flip fight.
Give me your sense of the difference between, like, he was clear between the first and second fight. So round 5 of fight 1, round 1 of fight 2, it was clear that they had a big change. I've talked about it a number of times. I'm sure you've seen it. The taller stance from Max. He was waiting for him. There was more linear attacks. A lot of different things, and they worked right away. But the third round, you can score it from Max, but that is where things slowly begin to turn, and it's those in-fight adjustments. Not a lot of fighters can do that very well, and Volkanovski is very good at that. What is the difference in decision-making between someone who can make adjustments between fights? And I'm not saying Max can't make in-fight adjustments, but clearly it was in that fight, Volkanovski's in-between round adjustments. How hard is that to do?
I think it can be hard if you don't have the right set of eyes outside of the cage as well too. I think a lot of those outside adjustments from the coaching staff, but you also have to kind of be in tune with the fighter and know. But for me, it's like if you're the coaching staff, you're kind of the catcher to the pitcher that's in the cage, and you're starting to set up pitches and do things to where now you can apply different techniques because we've been hammering out low and away. Now we're going over here because we set it up all 1, 2, and 3. So I think it's very important to kind of work on those things, especially in your sparring sessions when you're in the room or doing those, to apply and see if you can do it there and then pull it into the cage. But as we know, that's what maybe one of the downfalls for Max. He doesn't spar a whole hell of a lot. So where are those adjustments being made? To give an example, I like when my guys spar the same partner for 3 rounds, right? Usually it's rotate, rotate, rotate. Well, when we start getting closer to a fight, I want to make in-round adjustments that they're comfortable with. They hear the voice. They see my vision. They believe in what I see, and vice versa. So I think some of that, maybe not sparring a whole lot, could play an effect on some of the in-round coaching.
And then lastly, we have the main event. Israel Adesanya, I can never pronounce his name correctly, taking on, obviously, Jared Cannonier. What size he's up to for me? How do you view what is the central challenge in this fight?
I think distance management. I think it's going to be very hard. Well, not hard, but I think Cannonier has to find good ways to navigate through the length of Izzy. And Izzy does such a good job of sliding in and out, but creating angles from both stances. And I think that's where things get tricky. And I think that's what makes him so good, is he can hit from both stances. So if he cuts you off on the lead side, he has something over here. It might be from an open stance, but you're getting the same side head kicked off of something. So identifying stance switches in motion, that I think he does very, very well, and I think it's very hard to find guys that can fit that style. So I think Cannonier's got to find ways to get through some of that, and what you can do is get into those cage traps where you can put him in corner posts. You almost eliminate some of the angles that he has and gives him really right or left. So I think Cannonier has to be creative in some of those areas and getting him backed up to that cage.
One thing that always occurred to me, and this is my last question, I appreciate your time, which is if you go to the Blachowicz fight, now granted, Blachowicz is a much bigger guy. I know Cannonier has fought up weight classes, but Blachowicz is a real, sort of fits very well at 205. I don't think he made 185 of his life depended on it. He was able to obviously do the wrestling late, but the real part was he was checking all the leg kicks, and it kind of pushed Izzy into him. He didn't have to chase Izzy. Izzy had to go to him a little bit, and that was a complete game changer.
Yeah.
How important is it if you want to fight someone like Izzy? You can't just let him get away with the leg kicks.
It's his long jab. It's his long jab.
Oh, it's a great way to put it.
It's his long jab, and I think the way that he creates his angle, especially to attack the calf kick. Remember, the calf kick is like a safer, longer jab if it's applied correctly, and if your orthodox stance, right? You're trying to beat the lead angle off the shoulder to expose that calf, but also get out of any counters, right? So I think for Izzy, that calf kick and being able to shut that down early almost takes away one of his longer jabs.
Fair enough. Well, listen, this is the man you want to hear from. You'll see him on Saturday night in the corner of both Brad Tavares and Sean Strickland. Can't wait for this. Thank you so much for your time.
Good to have you.
Eric Nicksick, MMA Super Coach, Luke Thomas here at Xtreme Couture. We'll see you guys at the fights on Saturday.